Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. 7 years ago, the morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling penthouse, casting golden patterns across the marble floors where Amara Jefferson Sterling stood, her dark skin glowing in the warm light. She traced her fingers along the frame of their wedding photo, remembering the day 2 years ago when Liam had promised her the world. Today marked their second anniversary, and despite the growing shadows that had begun creeping into their lives over the past 6 months, hope still bloomed in her chest like the roses in their private garden. Mrs. Sterling, the soft voice of their housekeeper, Elena, broke through her reverie. Mr. Sterling asked me to give you this. She handed Amara an ivory envelope sealed with wax bearing the Sterling family crest, a tradition that had always seemed romantic before, but now felt weighted with expectation. Amara's heart fluttered as she opened it, recognizing Liam's elegant handwriting. My beloved Amara, 2 years ago, you became my wife, my anchor, my salvation. Today, I want to show you something that will prove my love is eternal. Meet me at the Horizon Gallery at 7. Wear the blue dress, the one from our first date. Forever yours, Liam. Tears pricked her eyes. Despite everything, the cold stares from his family that had grown more frequent, the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered rooms, the subtle cruelties that had been chipping away at her confidence for months, Liam still saw her, still loved her. The Horizon Gallery buzzed with anticipation as Amara arrived, her blue silk dress flowing around her ankles. The moment she stepped inside, her breath caught. The entire space had been transformed into a private exhibition featuring every piece of art she had ever mentioned. Monet's water lilies, Basquiat's vibrant expressions of Black identity, Frida Kahlo's raw emotional landscapes, all displayed under soft lighting that made them seem to pulse with life. Do you like it? Liam's voice came from behind her, warm and rich like expensive whiskey. She turned to find him holding a single white rose and a small velvet box. At 30 years old, Liam Sterling commanded every room he entered with his tall frame, piercing blue eyes, and that devastating smile that had captured her heart 3 years ago when she was curating a charity auction. Tonight, however, vulnerability softened his sharp features in a way that made her heart race. Liam, this is, she whispered, unable to finish as he dropped to one knee in the gallery's center. I know we're already married, he said, his voice thick with emotion she could feel in her own chest. But I want to ask you again here. Surrounded by beauty that pales in comparison to you, Amara Jefferson Sterling, will you renew your vows with me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are the greatest masterpiece I've ever beheld? Inside the box lay not a ring, but a key crafted from antique silver. To our new home, he explained, his eyes never leaving her face. Away from the city, away from he, didn't finish, but she understood. Away from his family's increasingly hostile presence. Yes, she breathed, throwing her arms around his neck as tears of joy streamed down her face. Yes, always. Yes. They made love that night with desperate passion, as if they both sensed the storm clouds gathering on their horizon. Amara fell asleep with her head on Liam's chest, listening to his heartbeat, unaware that 3 blocks away, Cassandra Sterling was already reviewing surveillance photographs with the cold efficiency of a general planning a war. The first sign of trouble came the next morning, when Amara discovered photographers camped outside their building. Their cameras clicked frantically as she left for work, the sound like mechanical insects feeding on her discomfort. Excuse me. She approached the nearest photographer, a thin man with predatory eyes. Why are you taking my picture? He grinned, revealing yellow teeth. Just doing a story, Mrs. Sterling, about your extracurricular activities. Her stomach clenched with dread. But she forced herself to walk normally to the subway. She couldn't let them see her fear. That would only encourage them. At the Jefferson Art Consulting Firm, the small but prestigious gallery she had built from nothing through years of dedication and networking, her assistant Nia looked troubled. Amara, there have been some calls, clients asking about. Well, asking if the rumors are true. What rumors? Amara's voice barely rose above a whisper. Something about you meeting with men, having affairs. Nia's brown eyes filled with sympathy. It's obviously ridiculous. Everyone who knows you knows how devoted you are to Mr. Sterling. But Amara's world tilted on its axis. She excused herself and fled to her office, locking the door before collapsing into her chair. Her hands shook as she called Liam, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried his office. But his secretary, a woman who had always been polite before, said coldly that he was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. Meanwhile, across the city in her opulent Park Avenue office, Cassandra Sterling sat reviewing the doctored photographs with Felix, her youngest son. While Liam had inherited their father's business empire and moral compass, Felix had inherited only Cassandra's ruthless ambition and sociopathic disregard for human suffering. The timing needs to be perfect, Cassandra said, her silver hair pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized her angular features and cold gray eyes. First we plant doubt, then we provide proof. By the time we're finished, Liam will thank us for opening his eyes to what that creature really is. Mother, don't you think this is somewhat extreme? Felix asked, though his tone suggested he was merely playing devil's advocate rather than expressing genuine concern. She's harmless enough. A bit uppity for her station, but harmless? Cassandra's laugh was like ice cracking on a frozen lake. She's a virus, Felix, a cancer that's already begun polluting our bloodline with her inferior genetics. Do you want your nephews and nieces to be mongrels? Do you want the Sterling legacy diluted by street blood and ghetto mentality? Felix winced at the venom in his mother's voice but nodded. He needed Cassandra's financial support to maintain his lifestyle of expensive cars and meaningless affairs, and crossing the family matriarch was a luxury he couldn't afford. What about Liam? He truly loves her. Liam is a romantic fool who thinks with his heart instead of his head. Once we show him the truth about his precious wife's character, he'll come to his senses. Cassandra's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Love is just a chemical reaction, darling, easily manipulated, easily destroyed. That evening, Amara sat in their walk-in closet, still wearing her work clothes, clutching her wedding dress against her chest like armor against an invisible enemy. The photographers had followed her home, shouting questions about alleged affairs she had never had. One had even pushed a grainy photograph under her nose, an image that looked like her embracing another man in what appeared to be their apartment building's garage, but it wasn't her. The woman in the photo had similar features, but Amara could see the subtle differences that a casual observer might miss. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to create this lie. "I'm not strong enough for this fight," she whispered to the wedding dress, tears staining the silk. The panic attacks had started 3 weeks ago, triggered by the constant surveillance and whispered accusations that seemed to follow her everywhere. She hadn't told Liam because she didn't want to burden him further. His relationship with his family was already strained because of their marriage, and she refused to be the reason it broke completely. She heard his key in the lock and quickly dried her tears, hanging up the dress with shaking hands that betrayed her inner turmoil. "Amara, where are you, sweetheart?" His voice carried exhaustion and something else: confusion, suspicion. The subtle change in his tone made her blood run cold. "Coming!" She forced brightness into her voice and emerged from the closet to find Liam sitting on their bed, holding a manila envelope with the same predatory stillness of a snake preparing to strike. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his blue eyes searching her face for something she couldn't identify. Her heart stopped. About what? He studied her with those eyes she loved so much. But now they held a distance that hadn't been there that morning. "These photos? My mother showed them to me today." The envelope contained more doctored images. Amara entering a hotel with a man whose face was conveniently obscured by shadows, Amara kissing someone in what appeared to be their private garage. Though the lighting made identification impossible, each image had been crafted with professional precision to suggest intimacy while maintaining plausible deniability. "Liam, these aren't real," she said, her voice breaking as she looked at the fabricated evidence of a crime she had never committed. "You have to believe me. I would never—" "I know," he said quickly, pulling her into his arms with the same fierce protectiveness that had made her fall in love with him. "I know you wouldn't, but my family, they're convinced there's truth to this. They want me to hire a private investigator." "Do it," Amara said fiercely, looking directly into his eyes with the honesty that had always been her greatest strength. "Hire 10 investigators. I have nothing to hide." Relief flooded his features like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "We'll get through this together." But as they held each other in the gathering darkness, neither of them saw the telephoto lens capturing their intimate moment through the bedroom window, or knew that Cassandra had already chosen their destroyer, a desperate father who would sell his soul to save his dying daughter. The trap was set with the precision of a master chess player thinking 20 moves ahead. The golden cage was closing around them both, and soon they would discover that love, no matter how pure, was no match for hate backed by unlimited resources and complete moral bankruptcy. Somewhere in a small apartment across town, Gideon Holt read his daughter a bedtime story while silently planning the destruction of an innocent woman's life. The photograph of his emaciated child served as both motivation and justification for what he was about to do. The storm was coming, and it would tear apart everything they had built. But in the ruins, something stronger would eventually grow if they could both survive the devastation that was about to engulf them, like a tsunami of manufactured lies and weaponized hatred. Chapter 2. The Servant's Lie. Years ago, 1 month later, Gideon Holt's calloused hands trembled as he turned the page of The Little Mermaid, his daughter's favorite story. 8-year-old Lila lay against his chest, her once golden hair gone, leaving only the pale, translucent skin that made her look like a porcelain doll. The chemotherapy had ravaged her small body, but her spirit remained unbroken. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "will I see Mommy in heaven soon?" Gideon's throat constricted. His wife, Clara, had died bringing this precious child into the world, bleeding out on the delivery table while he held their newborn daughter. For 8 years, it had been just the two of them against the world. Now that world was ending. "Not for a very long time, sweetheart," he managed, pressing his lips to her bald head. "The doctors are going to make you better." But the doctors had been clear. Without the experimental treatment in Switzerland, treatment that cost $300,000, Lila had weeks, maybe days. Gideon's insurance had reached its lifetime maximum. His savings were exhausted. He had already sold everything of value, including Clara's wedding ring. He was a maintenance worker at the Sterling estate, earning barely enough to keep them in their tiny apartment. He had applied for loans, started crowdfunding campaigns, even swallowed his pride and asked his wealthy employers for help. Cassandra Sterling had looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "We can't be expected to solve every employee's personal problems, Mr. Holt," she had said, not even looking up from her manicured nails. "Perhaps you should have thought about insurance before having children." Now, as Lila's breathing grew more labored, Gideon felt his world crumbling. Tomorrow, the hospital would discharge her. There was nothing more they could do without payment for the treatment. The knock on his door came at midnight. Felix Sterling stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed despite the late hour. His resemblance to Liam was superficial, where Liam had warmth in his eyes. Felix's were calculating and cold. "Mr. Holt, may I come in? I have a proposition that could save your daughter's life." Gideon's heart hammered as he led Felix into their humble living room, where medical equipment surrounded Lila's hospital bed. The little girl slept fitfully, her chest rising and falling with visible effort. "Beautiful child," Felix said, but his tone was clinical, detached. "Such a shame about her condition. I understand the treatment in Switzerland could cure her completely. What do you want?" Gideon's voice was heavy with exhaustion and desperation. Felix opened a briefcase and removed a thick envelope and several photographs. $400,000, more than enough for your daughter's treatment and your future security. Gideon stared at the money, more cash than he had ever seen. "What's the catch?" "A simple task. You will tell my brother that you had an affair with his wife. You'll provide these photographs as evidence." Felix spread the doctored images across their rickety coffee table. "You'll sign an affidavit detailing your relationship with Amara Sterling." Gideon's stomach lurched. He had met Amara many times during his work at the estate. She was kind, always asking about Lila, sometimes bringing gifts for his daughter. She had even written a letter to the Children's Hospital advocating for Lila's care. "I can't do that to Mrs. Sterling. She's a good woman. She doesn't deserve." "Your daughter deserves to live," Felix interrupted coldly. "Mrs. Sterling will be fine. She'll receive a generous divorce settlement and move on with her life. Your daughter, however, will die without this treatment. Tonight, probably. As if summoned by his words, Lila began coughing, a harsh, wet sound that sent Gideon rushing to her side. Blood flecked her lips, and her eyes fluttered open, unfocused with pain. "Daddy," she whispered, "it hurts." Gideon gathered her carefully in his arms, feeling how light she had become, how fragile. "I know, baby girl. I know." Felix watched this display with barely concealed impatience. "The offer expires at dawn, mister. Holt. After that, you'll never see me or this money again." After Felix left, Gideon sat in the darkness, holding his dying daughter. He thought about Clara, about the promises he had made at her grave to protect their child. He thought about Amara Sterling's kindness, her genuine smile when she asked about Lila's condition. By 3:00 a.m., Lila's breathing had become so labored that Gideon called 911. As paramedics worked to stabilize her, one pulled him aside. "She's fighting, but her body is shutting down. If you have any arrangements to make, now would be the time." Gideon made his decision in that moment, watching his daughter struggle for each breath. He would save her life, even if it damned his soul. The next day, he found himself standing outside the Vanguard Gallery, where Amara was preparing for a new exhibition. Through the window, he watched her work, her movements graceful and sure as she adjusted lighting on a painting. A young artist, clearly nervous and out of place, approached her with a portfolio. Gideon saw Amara's face light up as she reviewed the work, saw her encourage the young man, saw her make a phone call that resulted in the artist weeping with joy. She had just changed someone's life with a single act of kindness, and Gideon was about to destroy her. He turned away, unable to watch anymore, and walked to the nearest church. He hadn't prayed since Clara died, but now he fell to his knees in the empty sanctuary. "God, if you're listening, forgive me. I'm about to become a monster to save my child. If there's justice in this world, let it fall on me, not on her." That evening, as Lila's condition worsened, Gideon practiced his lies in the bathroom mirror while she slept. Each word felt like acid in his mouth. "Mrs. Sterling and we began our affair 6 months ago. She said her husband didn't understand her. We met at the Grand View Hotel." Tears streamed down his face as he rehearsed the script Felix had provided. "Forgive me, Mrs. Sterling," he whispered to his reflection. "My daughter needs her daddy to be a monster." He returned to Lila's bedside and held her tiny hand. Her skin was burning with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Daddy's going to save you, baby girl," he whispered, kissing her forehead, "even if it costs him his soul." At dawn, as Lila's heart monitor began showing irregular rhythms, Gideon called Felix Sterling. "I'll do it," he said, his voice dead. "I'll destroy your brother's marriage. Just save my daughter." "Excellent." Felix's voice was smooth with satisfaction. "The money will be in your account within the hour. Be at the estate this afternoon. Liam will be home by 6. As Gideon hung up the phone, Lila's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" He forced a smile, though it felt like his face might crack. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy's going to fix everything." But as he held his dying daughter and waited for the money that would save her life, Gideon Holt knew that some things, once broken, could never truly be fixed. He was about to shatter an innocent woman's world, and the weight of that knowledge would haunt him forever. Outside their window, storm clouds gathered in the sky, as if nature itself was preparing for the devastation about to unfold. Love was about to face its greatest test, and only one heart would survive the reckoning. The die was cast. The lie was born, and somewhere across the city, Amara Sterling hummed happily as she arranged flowers for a dinner that would end her marriage forever. Chapter 3. The Shattering. Years ago, the divorce. The bedroom that had once been their sanctuary now felt like a mausoleum where love lay dying. Photographs of their happiness lined the dresser, their wedding day with Amara's radiant smile, their honeymoon in Tuscany where they had made love under ancient olive trees, last Christmas morning when Amara had laughed so hard at Liam's attempt to cook breakfast that she had snorted champagne through her nose. Those images now seemed to mock them with their frozen joy, testament to a happiness that felt like it belonged to different people entirely. Liam stood rigid by their bay window, his back to her like an insurmountable wall. His shoulders were tense with the weight of betrayal he believed he carried, and when he finally turned to face her, Amara gasped at what she saw. This wasn't her husband. This was a broken man with hollow eyes and grief etched into every line of his face like scars from an invisible war. "Tell me it's not true." His voice was barely human, roughened by 3 hours of listening to Gideon Holt's carefully rehearsed lies and studying fabricated evidence with forensic intensity. "Tell me you didn't betray everything we built together." Amara sat on their bed at 5 months pregnant, her rounded belly now obvious beneath the silk nightgown he had bought her in Paris. She had been planning to share the pregnancy news properly tonight with dinner and candles and joy. Instead, her unborn child had become a witness to the destruction of their marriage. "What are you talking about? Betray what, Liam? You're scaring me." Her voice carried genuine confusion and growing terror as she watched the man she loved transform into someone she didn't recognize. He turned then, and she saw devastation in his eyes, the complete destruction of everything he had believed about their life together. In his hands was a manila envelope, thick with condemnation and professionally crafted lies. "Gideon Holt came to see me today." Each word fell like a hammer blow against her heart. "He told me about your affair, about the hotels, about the lies you've been feeding me for months while I defended you to my family." Amara struggled to her feet, her pregnancy making her movements awkward. "Liam, I don't know what he told you, but 6 months, Amara." Liam's voice cracked like ice breaking under pressure. "Right when you got pregnant, he said the affair started 6 months ago. He knew details about you that only a lover would know." Amara's mind reeled with horror and understanding. The timeline was deliberate. They wanted Liam to believe the baby wasn't his. "Liam, he's lying. I swear on our unborn child's life, I have never been unfaithful to you. This baby is yours." Liam threw the envelope at her feet with violent force, its contents spilling across their Persian rug like evidence of her guilt. Doctored photographs showed her in embraces with a man whose face was always obscured by shadows or camera angles. Hotel receipts bore her forged signature, dated to coincide with her early pregnancy. Love letters, written in script that experts would later identify as a perfect match to hers, detailed passionate encounters during the exact weeks their child was conceived. Amara dropped to her knees despite her pregnancy, gathering the fabricated evidence with shaking hands, her wedding ring catching the lamplight like a mockery of their vows. "These aren't real. Look at me. Look at your pregnant wife, and tell me you believe I could do this to us." But when she looked up with tears streaming down her face, his eyes were already dead to her, cold and distant as winter stars. "I trusted you with everything, my heart, my future, my dreams of having children with you and growing old together, and you threw it all away for him." "No." The word tore from her throat like a scream. She struggled to stand, her pregnant belly making her vulnerable and clumsy. "Liam, please. Someone is doing this to us. Your family, they never wanted us together. This baby is yours. Look at the dates. I was already pregnant when these alleged affairs supposedly started." "The affair could have started earlier," Liam said coldly, his voice carrying a finality that made her blood freeze. "Maybe you got pregnant by him and tried to pass the child off as mine." "Don't." Her voice broke completely. "Don't you dare question the paternity of our child. This baby was conceived in love in our bed the night we celebrated our 2nd anniversary." But Liam's face was stone, carved from marble, and just as cold. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Those words broke something fundamental inside Amara, not just her heart, but her entire conception of reality. She felt it snap like a bone, the sound echoing through her soul as she clutched her pregnant belly protectively. "Get out," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of a judge delivering a death sentence. "Pack your things and get out of my house." "Our house," she whispered, looking around at the room where they had shared their most intimate moments. "This is our home, Liam. We're having a baby together. You can't just—" "That remains to be seen," Liam interrupted, his words like knives cutting through her remaining hope. "DNA tests will determine the truth after the birth." "You want a DNA test?" Amara's voice rose with desperate fury. "Fine, we'll do it right now. There are prenatal tests. And risk harming the child if it is mine? No. But the moment that baby is born, we'll know the truth." The words hung in the air like a curse, poisoning the very atmosphere of their sanctuary. Amara felt something inside her Dino, just her marriage. But her faith in the man she had trusted with her heart. For the next week, as lawyers circled like vultures and paperwork was prepared, Amara moved through their home like a ghost. The pregnancy made everything harder. Morning sickness that left her weak, back pain that made sleep impossible, and the constant weight of growing a child whose father had rejected them both. Cassandra Sterling took charge of the divorce proceedings with military precision, having anticipated this moment for months and prepared for it like a general planning, a siege. The prenuptial agreement Amara had signed in a haze of love and trust became her executioner, every clause crafted to ensure she would leave the marriage with nothing. "She gets nothing," Cassandra announced to their family lawyer with undisguised satisfaction. "The adultery clause voids any claim to alimony or property settlement, and if that child isn't Liam's, she'll owe us for emotional distress." They took everything with systematic cruelty. The jewelry Liam had given her during their courtship and marriage, including her grandmother's wedding ring that he had surprised her with on their first anniversary, the art collection she had curated with love and expertise, the clothes in her closet, since they had been purchased with sterling money. The final confrontation came on a rain-soaked Thursday in November, the sky weeping tears that Amara could no longer shed. Security guards, men who had once nodded respectfully when she passed, now stood ready to escort her from the estate like a criminal. Amara stood in the marble foyer, holding a single battered suitcase, her pregnancy now unmistakably obvious at nearly 6 months. The grandeur of the space mocked her. Crystal chandeliers that had once welcomed her home now looked down like glittering judges. Liam watched from the stairs, his face impassive as the statues. Cassandra stood beside him, her triumph barely concealed behind a mask of feigned regret. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, dear," Cassandra said with false sympathy, "but surely you understand that actions have consequences." Amara ignored her completely, focusing all her remaining strength on Liam. "I know you can't hear me anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "But I need you to know that every moment of our marriage was real for me. Every kiss, every promise, every dream we shared, it was all real." Something flickered in Liam's eye-spain, perhaps, or the ghost of the love that had once lived there. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "This baby is yours, Liam," she said, placing both hands on her rounded belly. "No matter what lies they've told you, no matter what fake evidence they've shown you, this child was created from our love. When you hold our baby in your arms, you'll know the truth." She walked toward the massive oak doors, then paused at the threshold. "I'll be waiting for that DNA test. Because when it proves this baby is yours, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you threw away your pregnant wife based on lies." But as the massive oak doors of the Sterling estate closed behind her forever, with a sound like the gates of heaven slamming shut, Amara collapsed on the rain-soaked steps. At 5 months pregnant and completely alone, she pressed her hands to her belly and made a promise to her unborn child. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered into the rain. "But I'll protect you. I'll raise you with enough love for both parents. And someday, when Daddy learns the truth, he'll come looking for us." Inside the mansion, Liam stood at his window, watching her broken form on the security monitor. His hand moved toward the intercom button twice, but he never pressed it. Love was dead, buried beneath the weight of lies he believed were truth. And somewhere across the city, Gideon Holt held his daughter, now healthy and alive thanks to Swiss doctors and blood money, and wept for the innocent woman whose life he had destroyed, and for the unborn child who would grow up fatherless because of his lies. The storm raged on, washing the city clean of everything except guilt, and 3 lives were forever changed by a deception so carefully crafted it felt more real than truth. Chapter 4. Desperate Hearts. Years ago, 7 months later, single motherhood. The charity hospital room smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Amara Jefferson Shea had legally changed her name back, unable to bear the weight of Sterling any longer gripped the bed rails as another contraction ripped through her body. At 32 weeks pregnant, her daughter was coming too early, triggered by months of stress, poor nutrition, and sleeping in her car. "The baby's coming whether we're ready or not, doctor," Naomi Lynn said gently, checking Amara's cervix. She was the only doctor at Mercy General who didn't look at Amara with judgment when she admitted she had no insurance, no money, and no husband. Amara had been living in her Honda Civic for 4 months, ever since being evicted from the apartment she could no longer afford. She had sold everything of value piece by piece, her designer clothes, her college textbooks, even her engagement ring from a pawn shop for grocery money. But somehow, she had kept herself and her baby alive. "I can't afford this," Amara gasped between contractions. "The NICU, the surgery. Right now, let's focus on getting your baby here safely, doctor." Lynn interrupted. "We'll worry about the bills later." Violet Rose Jefferson entered the world fighting, her tiny lungs struggling to process oxygen they weren't designed to handle yet. She weighed 2 pounds 4 ounces, and her skin was so translucent, Amara could see her daughter's heart beating through her chest. "She's beautiful," Amara whispered through tears as the NICU team prepared to take her daughter away. "She's perfect." For 2 months, Amara lived in the hospital like a ghost. She slept in uncomfortable chairs in the NICU waiting room, showered in the family bathroom when nurses weren't looking, and ate whatever free food she could find in the cafeteria. Her entire world consisted of an incubator, monitors, and the sound of her daughter fighting for life. "Mommy's here, Angel," she would whisper through the glass, pressing her palm against the clear barrier. "You're my little warrior. We're going to get through this together." The medical bills mounted into the hundreds of thousands. Social workers tried to discuss options for placement, suggesting that a premature baby with ongoing medical needs might be better served in a home with resources. Amara refused every conversation. "She's mine," she told them firmly. "I'll figure it out." When Violet was finally strong enough to leave the hospital at 4 months old, weighing barely 5 pounds, Amara faced a new reality. She couldn't live in her car with a medically fragile infant. The social workers were watching, ready to step in if they deemed her situation unfit. She found a studio apartment in the worst part of town for $400 a month, paid for with money she made, cleaning office buildings at night, while Violet slept in a carrier strapped to her chest. During the day, she cleaned houses while her daughter played quietly in corners, having learned early that survival meant being invisible. The morning she met Marcus Caldwell, she was operating on 3 hours of sleep and pure maternal desperation. 2-month-old Violet was fussy from an ear infection, and Amara was juggling her crying daughter, a diaper bag, and the embarrassment of having her credit card declined at the pharmacy. "I can try again," she told the pharmacist, knowing her account was empty but hoping for a miracle. "Please, she needs this antibiotic." "Ma'am, the card was declined." "Do you have cash?" Amara's eyes filled with tears as Violet's cries grew louder. "Should see." 32 was all she had until her next cleaning job that evening. "I'll pay for it." The voice came from behind her in line. Amara turned to see a well-dressed man in his early 30s, handsome in a calculated way that suggested he understood his own appeal. His expensive suit and confident posture marked him as someone who had never worried about declined credit cards or sick babies he couldn't afford to treat. "You don't have to," Amara started. "It's just medicine for a baby," Marcus Caldwell said, handing his platinum card to the pharmacist. "No child should suffer because of money." Amara stared at him in disbelief as he paid the $47 prescription without hesitation. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay." "You don't need to repay anything," he said, studying her with interest that made her uncomfortable. "What's your name?" "Amara. And this is Violet." "Beautiful name for a beautiful baby," he said. But his eyes weren't on Violet. They were cataloging Amara's desperation with the precision of someone who understood weakness. "I'm Marcus Caldwell, and you look like someone who could use a friend." What Amara didn't know was that Marcus had been watching her struggle for weeks. He had seen her pushing Violet's second-hand stroller through his upscale neighborhood where she cleaned houses, had noticed her careful thrift store clothes and the way she counted change before buying groceries. She was exactly what he had been looking for. A woman desperate enough to be grateful for rescue. Over the following weeks, Marcus appeared in her life like salvation. He brought groceries when her refrigerator was empty, paid for Violet's pediatric visits when bills overwhelmed her, and listened with apparent sympathy as she edited her story to hide the worst of her shame. "I was married before," she told him during their first coffee date while Violet slept in her stroller. "My husband left when he found out about the baby. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth, either." She couldn't bear to admit that her ex-husband had accused her of adultery and demanded DNA tests to prove paternity. "What kind of man abandons his pregnant wife?" Marcus asked with perfect indignation. "You and Violet deserve so much better." He studied her like a master manipulator studies prey, learning her vulnerabilities with scientific precision, her desperate need for security after months of uncertainty, her terror of losing Violet to social services, her longing for someone to share the overwhelming responsibility of raising a medically fragile child alone. But what truly sealed his interest was the day he overheard her on the phone with a bill collector using the name Jefferson, when a legal document clearly addressed to Amara Sterling had fallen from her purse. A quick internet search revealed everything. The society wedding, the scandal, the very public divorce from one of the city's most powerful families. Amara Sterling wasn't just any desperate single mother. She was the ex-wife of Liam Sterling, a woman who had once moved in the highest social circles, who had connections in the art world that could be valuable to his struggling business, a woman who had lost everything and would be grateful to anyone who offered her stability. "I know you've been hurt," Marcus said during their third month of carefully orchestrated courtship, his voice carrying exactly the right mixture of understanding and strength. "I know you think you're broken, but I see the beautiful woman you really are, Amara. I see your strength, your intelligence, your incredible capacity for love." "I come with complications," Amara warned him, looking down at Violet, who was now a healthy 6-month-old with bright blue eyes and a stubborn chin. "Medical bills, sleepless nights. A daughter who will always come first. I want to be part of your family," Marcus said with perfect sincerity. "Both of you. Let me take care of you the way you deserve." When he proposed 3 months later with a modest diamond ring, Amara stared at her reflection in his bathroom mirror afterward. She didn't love Marcus not the way she had loved Liam, with every cell of her being singing his name. But love had destroyed her, left her bleeding on divorce papers while the man who had promised to cherish her moved on with his life. Maybe practicality would save her where passion had failed. "I need stability for Violet," she whispered to her reflection, touching the small diamond that represented security rather than love. "I need someone who won't abandon us." On their wedding night in a modest hotel room, Amara lay awake staring at the ceiling while Marcus slept beside her. Violet was in her crib next to the bed, breathing peacefully for the first time in months without the fear of eviction or empty cupboards. "Thank you," she whispered to whatever God had sent Marcus to save them. She didn't notice the satisfied smile that crossed her new husband's face in the darkness. What she also didn't notice was the way Marcus's eyes lingered on legal documents, calculating Violet's birth date against standard pregnancy timelines, noting the blue eyes that looked nothing like his own brown ones. He suspected from the beginning that this child wasn't his biological daughter, but that was perfect. A woman with secrets was easier to control, and Liam Sterling's daughter would be a useful card to play if he ever needed leverage against one of the most powerful families in the city. "Tomorrow we start our new life together," he murmured, but his eyes were cold with planning rather than warm with love. Outside their window, rain began to fall like tears from heaven, as if the world itself was mourning the end of Amara's hope for true love and the beginning of a marriage built on desperation and carefully hidden deception. Chapter 5. The Second Betrayal. Years ago, after Violet's birth, the contraction ripped through Amara's body like lightning at 32 weeks, doubling her over in the middle of Caldwell Logistics warehouse, where she had been updating inventory records. Despite her doctor's warnings about stress and overwork, her water broke with a gush that soaked through her maternity pants and pooled on the concrete floor 8 weeks before their daughter was supposed to make her entrance into the world. "Call 911, she gasped to Terrence, the warehouse supervisor, who looked terrified at the sight of blood mixed with amniotic fluid. Amara had been working 12-hour days despite her high-risk pregnancy status, driven by Marcus's relentless demands that she earn her keep and his constant reminders that her medical bills were already straining their finances. "The baby's coming too early," she whispered, clutching her swollen belly as another wave of pain crashed over her. At 32 weeks, her daughter wasn't ready for the world outside the womb, but the world was demanding her arrival anyway. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and medical terminology she couldn't understand through her pain. Premature rupture of membranes. The paramedic radioed to the hospital. Possible placentale abruption. ETA. 5 minutes. Marcus met them at the emergency room, but his face showed controlled irritation rather than the concern of an expectant father. "How much is this going to cost?" were his first words to Dr.